A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Thank you for joining us for another webinar for July. I'm very excited to have this guest, which is with us. Inshallah, we'll head over to the main discussion for today very soon. As we normally do start, I'd like to start with a few verses, a reflection from the Holy Quran. One of the ideas or one of the struggles which we have faced is having platforms which will speak for us or speak the truth or cover what is true. One of the ayah which come into mind in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَلَا تَسْلَبُوا الْحَقِّ بِالْبَاطِلِ, do not mix truth with falsehood, and do not conceal the truth while you know. And we have a lot of that, unfortunately, in some media articles where there's a bit of truth, but there's a bit of falsehood as well. Another verse from Surah At-Tawbah, verse 119, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu ittaqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. O you who have faith, have taqwa, be mindful of Allah and be with the truthful. And again, this understanding of concept of sadiqeen, what is to do, be with the truthful, and what that means. Also, the reflection from the last few verses of chapter 10. And this is a very interesting set of verses, because this is addressed to An-Nas, the mankind. It's not just addressed to Al-Mu'minun, it's addressed to mankind as a whole. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Qul ya ayyuhan nas, qad ja'akum al-haq min rabbikum. Say, O mankind, surely the truth has come to your Lord. So whoever is guided, he is only guided to his own benefit. فَمَنْ اهْتَدَى فَإِنَّمَا يَهْتَدِي لِنَفْسِهِ. So for his own soul, for his own nafs. And similarly, one who goes astray to his own detriment. وَمَا أَنَّا عَلَيْكُمْ بِوَكِيلٍ. And this is really important. The Prophet is saying that while the truth has come to you, and it's a reflection to say that the responsibility is to portray the truth, but not to be a wakil or a trustee over someone. In these verses where we might feel that, okay, people aren't following the truth, but here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the messenger to say that he is not a wakil over us in terms of trustee. The verse continues and follow what ma yuha ilayk, and follow what is revealed. Wasbir hatta yuhkamullah. And many verses in the Quran, the truth is also often followed with the concept of sabr, having patience, to be with the truth and follow what is revealed unto you and be patient until Allah issues his judgment. وَهُوَ خَيْرَ الْحَاكِمِينَ, for he is the best of judges. So a beautiful concept which runs throughout the Quran of al-haq, being with truth, and what that means for us. Just a short introduction of what we do. So if you joined and you're not quite sure, or it's the first time you're joining, Strong Support is a peer support organization for Muslims who struggle with sexual and gender identity. We offer free consultation. You can go on the website. There's a free 25-minute consultation. Over the years, because of the type of audiences which have come to us, we have expanded our circles. So there's now 2 men's circles. The one on Thursdays, which I run, is mostly full. We have another second circle we're starting now on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. We have a circle for women as well on Sundays, 12:30. And then we've also recently started a spouse circle based on the need of spouses of men or women struggling with same-sex attraction or so on, and they don't have really a place to go to. We also have discounted one-to-one coaching, which we offer. I do that on Friday evenings. You can get that. I also know a huge portion of our audience is parents who are worried, about their children, but also about the education. But the circle is mainly targeted for parents who have children who find themselves struggling with their identity. They may be in Islam, they may have left Islam, and a support service for those parents who are unsure of how to reconnect with those children. So that's on Sundays at 8 p.m. And then we try to do outreach and highlight great work which is being done in the community, such as today, where we highlight work which is to be commended through these webinars. So if you haven't know what 5 Pillars is, 5 Pillars is and in a very rare nowadays in an independent Muslim media platform. It's regulated by Impress, and it is definitely one of the platforms which I encourage you to visit if you haven't already heard about it. I'm very honored that we do have the editor who is incredibly busy and is in different places at different times, and I'm very happy he can join us from his home at present. A very brief introduction. So Brother Roshan has been a journalist for 21 years. He started off his career in local newspapers in the UK before moving on to journalism with London Weekend Television. He then worked with Al Jazeera's website in Qatar, and then going to UK afterward. He was head at the Islam channel between 2005 and 2007. He also moved to Press TV, where he was head of news in London for 5 years. He is a documentary maker and currently the editor of the British Muslim news site 5 Pillars. He's reported over 25 countries, so many things there, like Iraq war, occupation, the earthquake of 2006 in Pakistan, the Lebanon-Israel war, the Iran nuclear crises, the Egyptian revolution, and there's so much more. In 2017, Brother Roshan also published this book, and I think it's one of the rare perspectives of having a Muslim journalist. And what's in this book is, again, more about his travels. Like you've just seen, he travels a lot. So he mentions the different experiences. I've only seen snippets about Crimea, Russian, very broad, different topics, sometimes humor. There's humor in there as well. So if you are in that line of work, and I think many Muslims should be in this line of work where there's so little Muslim journalism. I think you wouldn't, it wouldn't be something you'd regret reading. Definitely very interesting read. And again, like I say, something quite rare to find in terms of from a British Muslim perspective. He's with us, so I spoke to Brother Roshan, and it's actually new for us. So I think we're meeting at the this meeting is quite new for us as well. I've known for Five Pillars for a long time, but Roshan doesn't know me. But I introduced to him what we did, and he sent out this tweet, which just speaks for itself, speaks for the platform, speaks for what we're doing here. So thank you for that. And I think a lot of people, webinar guests we do have on, and they don't. We've asked them, publicize and so on, and they haven't. And Brother Roshan's been even with, I would say, he's probably one of the guests which I haven't met before. A lot of my webinar guests I do meet before. So just wanted to point out that his work in a short time with us is and the community is commendable. I have worked with Brother Yusuf, as a lot of you know, Brother Yusuf Patel. He does great work. And we worked with him when this legislation came through a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, when they started with the consultation. And we were afraid that there was not a Muslim voice to this issue in terms of the media paints it as a very Christian narrative, and they don't realize that, legislation like this affects other faith communities. We were very lucky to have Muslim leaders. There were about 800 signatories to this, and there were 250 ulama across the Muslim diaspora. You had people, I have people in my team who said, I have names which are signed, which have never signed things before. So it was really different parts of the Muslim community coming together and speaking about this very important issue. Also, I want to highlight that as well as I want to shout out as well to Islam 21C, who also covered this as well. But I can tell you very few media platforms have the backbone to cover material like this. It is incredibly hard. It is, and inshallah, we will speak about this in terms of censorship and how difficult it is to just speak on these topics. And I think when you are seeing platforms which are talking about this, and I think Five Pillars to me is leading in this conversation with the LGBTQ issue, is very, very important that we're supporting this platform, because there isn't other platforms. And I know I've been on tried to go to other platforms and say, hey, we're not disrespectful. We would just like to portray another point of view, and don't listen from us, listen from the people we're helping, because we might be biased, just listen to their voices. But no platform would voice our community, the concerns of our community. So I think for those that don't know, getting something like this across and putting this is difficult, and we'll discuss how it has caused them issues in the past in talking about this subject. Recently, I just want to shout out, again, brilliant examples. There's so many examples. I'm only giving you the ones which are recent. fantastic article today on the need for parents to really recognize they have power, they have a say. You've got a former head teacher here talking about the inappropriate content, which is increasingly we're seeing putting in schools, not in all schools, but in certain schools, and the responsibility for parents to know that they can get together and they can challenge the education which is being there, and to give that feedback. I know we were just saying before, I'm in Manchester, and I had a lot of people telling me about the protests at Birchfields and what they were teaching. And, it was 5 pillars that was covering that. And I also want to put in the amount of work it takes for someone to go there, cover the story, get the story out, and then present it to someone to us. And I think sometimes that gets doesn't get appreciated as much as the effort which goes behind collecting the story and so on. So we talked about controversy. I think this is perhaps the only controversy which, as I know, which have faced, and some people saying, "Oh, this, what was this?" And there was a COVID-19 emergency fund, which a lot of this organization pinned. A lot of people applied for during the COVID grant, where it was difficult for organizations like news organizations to go. And there was, I don't know, 90 or so that they were given a grant to, and somehow, just because Daily Mail or I don't know, Quilliam or whoever, they found that there was something that was not palatable or so on, or has a different perspective. You had this crisis, and what I really want to get off is that doesn't deter them. It wasn't like a lot of people would say, "Oh, okay, we can't talk about this issue," or "We can't even open up our mouths and talk about this." And to see that hasn't deterred, and that they continue to report what is true. It's not about fighting one ideology, but it's simply about putting a Muslim narrative, and that's all we're doing. We're not actively going against someone, or we're just saying this is our narrative. And as much as other people have freedom of speech, do we really have freedom of speech to talk about our own narrative? So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Brother Roshan. Thank you so much for joining us, and I know you're usually very busy, so thank you for this time.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ali. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
Yes, fine, alhamdulillah. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, I wanted to start. What was it that made you say 21 years ago, or however much it was, I want to go into journalism. This is what I want to do. How did it all start for you?
More than 21 years ago now, actually. I think I just love to read and write, and I didn't want to do a conventional job whereby I was in, one office or one building all the time. I wanted to travel. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to do interesting stuff. I was quite curious about the world and about people and about politics in different countries. So I really wanted to do a job which would kind of facilitate that. Early on in my career, I wasn't a great student. I was an average student, and I kind of fell into teaching right at the beginning of my career. And I did that for 2 years. I didn't enjoy it. And I decided to make a career change. So I retrained as a journalist, and then I launched my career as a journalist, probably at the age of about 25. after doing a few years teaching after university and getting a master's as well. Not a master's, it was a postgraduate certificate in education. And so yeah, it was just that curiosity, not wanting to do a conventional job, conventional 9-to-5 job, something that would allow me to learn and to have, you know, new experiences every day. So I thought journalism was something that I wanted to do, and I haven't regretted that decision.
Fantastic. And shows you don't have to be great at school, right? To create.
Well, I think I mean, I wasn't terrible at school, but I would say I was an average student, and I wasn't particularly hardworking. All the qualities that I kind of learned through 25 years of professionalism now, I didn't have when I was a kid. I think a lot of people will say that as well. But I think, you know, just because you might get bad A levels or even a bad degree, it doesn't mean you're going to be a failure in life. You know, some of us can be kind of later developers, and I think I was a later developer.
And it's so true that, you know, for those who might be watching and saying, oh, you know, I came from a very academic background and ended up doing something very different now to what I thought I'd be doing. So, yeah. How you've worked in a number of Muslim organizations, and I saw from your book that it says even the Muslim media has a narrative or a funded narrative.
Yeah.
Would you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started Five Pillars, because I'm someone who's worked in Muslim media the vast majority of my career. So obviously I did a kind of a 5-year stint in the mainstream right at the beginning, and it was a very good training, but it wasn't for me because the kind of journalism that they were doing, well, we all know what they do, you know, it's not something that I feel is compatible with a believing, practicing Muslim. And that's why even now, I'm not particularly respectful, even I would say, of Muslims that work in the mainstream. I don't particularly think they should be working there, other than to just get a training and then move on, because it's you know, ultimately it's a disseminator of Islamophobia. And if you work there, you might be able to influence a little bit from the inside, but the more likely scenario is that you get crushed by the system, you become like them, you become a way for them to tell the world that they're employing Muslim journalists or brown journalists or black journalists, but in reality, it's just tokenism. So the mainstream wasn't for me, but I also found that working at different Muslim channels, big ones and small ones. So I worked at Al Jazeera, which I wouldn't call a Muslim channel. It's basically a secular channel, but it is based in the Muslim world, and it does have Islamic values to a certain extent. But obviously, they're funded by the Qatari state. So if Qatari state policy changes from one day to the next, then so does Al Jazeera's policy. So they don't have constant principles. So one day, for example, you know, Qatar may be friends with Egypt, and the next day they'll be enemies with Egypt. And then that will kind of be reflected in the articles and the videos you see on Al Jazeera TV. The principles are not constant. And when I was there, they were just launching Al Jazeera English, and it had a very different policy to Al Jazeera Arabic. Al Jazeera Arabic had more of an Islamic influence, I think, because of the journalists themselves. Al Jazeera English was very westernized, and they ended up supporting things like abortion and supporting LGBT lifestyles, stuff like that, which you know, to me seemed incredible for a organization which is run by a Muslim state, you know. So there was that. Then I came to Islam Channel. I had a stint to Islam Channel. That was a little bit better because it wasn't so much of a secular channel, it was more of a religious channel. But even they had red lines. They're kind of regulated by Ofcom, which means they have to give the other opinion all the time. And let's say they're talking about Palestine, they've got to get an Israeli voice on, and that just seemed wrong to me. And also there were certain things that they couldn't say, and they were quite, although I don't want to kind of cuss Islam Channel because there were many good things that they did while I was there as well. I still felt that I couldn't really express myself as a Muslim journalist, even at Islam Channel. And then I went on to work at Press TV, which is an Iranian-funded channel. Again, there were certain things that I agreed with and other things which I disagreed with. But ultimately, it's funded by the Iranian state. So it's Iranian state policy which determines what the journalism is. So I thought, look, I've been a journalist for so long. A lot of it, I've had amazing experiences all over the Muslim world. I've been here, there, and everywhere, covered wars, natural disasters, major political events. I've had this kind of front seat when it comes to history, and Muslim history in particular. So I thought, I've got so many contacts now. Why don't I do something on my own? Something where I'm in the driving seat, something where the only the only yardstick I will have is La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. You know, literally, my constitution will be the Quran, and my journalism will be Islamic journalism. And the only red lines that I will adhere to are not something, I don't know, a particular Islamic sect says, or a nation state says, but what the Quran says, what Rasulullah says, you know? So I wanted those to be my parameters. So that's why I kind of set up 5 pillars, so that those literally would be our parameters. And we would genuinely be doing something on behalf of the Ummah, on behalf of Islam, on behalf of, you know, Rasulullah. Those would be the kind of yardsticks that we would judge ourselves by, and we wouldn't have to kind of answer to a nation state or a sectarian group. We would just literally be answering, you know, to the Ummah ultimately. So that's kind of why I started 5 pillars.
Fantastic. And, you know, do you think that because obviously you know Muslim journalists, do you think that a lot of them are in that situation where you're describing, they're not really able to fully maybe present, and obviously that's with a lot of roles, I guess, in the media, and that brings a lot of frustration. Do you still hear that from your colleagues?
You mean in the mainstream?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you talk to someone like Asad Beg, for example, who worked at Channel 4 for many years, he now works at Al Jazeera. I mean, he was literally virtually hounded out of Channel 4. Maybe hounded out is not the right word, but he kind of left because he was being forced to kind of. I remember once he did a report on the Qadianis, and he gave the mainstream Islamic position that, you know, I think he said that they self-identify as Muslims, which is what they do, whereas the mainstream position is they're not Muslims. And I think he was reprimanded for that. So, you know, here we have a secular broadcaster, Channel 4 News, telling a Muslim journalist what Islam is, you know? So, yeah, you know, look, I mean, there are many Muslims who work for the BBC, for example, and they might not be particularly practicing. So they might think they're in a great place, but I would say they need to check their Islam to a certain extent, because they're probably not as believing and as practicing as they should be. I hate to be so judgmental, but I think my experience tells me that. Whereas those who are believing and practicing don't last very long, because ultimately they will clash with the machine, you know, that will crush them. And they end up leaving, or they end up even leaving journalism altogether, or they go and try and work with an international broadcaster like TRT or Al Jazeera in the Muslim world, so at least they can live in a Muslim environment, or they do other stuff. Yeah.
What made it different for you? Was it a calling? Because a lot of people say, okay, I can't, you know, I've got my international news media outlet, it looks good on my CV.
Yeah.
What made it different for you to say, no, I want to create something of my own that would be representative? What was, you know, what made you say no, or have that calling to create 5 pillars to say, no, we really need something which is independent?
Well, I think I was a little bit older than most journalists when faced with that decision. So I think I was 40 years old when I started 5 Pillars, you know, and that's coming on for 10 years ago. now, you know, so I'm giving away my age now. And yeah, so I'd already kind of established myself. I'd already worked for the big organizations. So I had no real desire to make it big at Al Jazeera or somewhere else, because I'd already been through those experiences. And I really wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to be in control of my own schedule, in control of what stories I did and what I didn't do, what spin I put on those stories, etc. I didn't want someone in a foreign country telling me what to do, or someone with a vested interest telling me what to do, etc. So I really wanted to be my own boss. I had a real drive to do that. I do enjoy journalism. I've always really loved it. It's the only thing I'm probably good at, you know. So and I have all these contacts through, you know, 20 years of traveling the world and you know, at home and abroad. So I really wanted to exploit that as well, the goodwill that I generated over the years. And what you see on Five Pillars is basically the fruits of that.
Exactly. And, you know, what we see now, how much work does it take to create an article or to create a story or video? I mean, you're very active on social media. It's like almost when the story breaks, you're covering it. But I'm wondering how much you have to, you know, collect, speak, and, you know, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a full-time job. So myself and Dilly Hussain, who's my colleague and business partner at Five Pillars, we're on it full-time. So that is what you just described, that is our job, ultimately, to be on it. Yeah, what does it take to produce an article or a video? I mean, how long is a piece of string, basically? Some articles I can do very quickly. I can do in half an hour or 45 minutes. Some articles I've taken 6 weeks to do. Simply because they have legal implications. You have to, like some of the charity exposés that we've done, some of the articles that we've done where insiders in charities, Muslim charities, have come to us with evidence of wrongdoing in those charities, and ultimately the squandering of the Ummah's money. So those stories, if we just put them out, we would get sued. So we have to do the checks. We have to say, look, is this the truth, first of all? Does it stack up? Just because someone tells us something doesn't mean it's true, because we're all prone to exaggeration. Some of us, unfortunately, lie as well. Some of us have vested interests. So first of all, I've got to do the checks. Is what this person telling me, is it true? If it is true, then I have to go to the alleged bad guy, you know, and say, what's your response? And I have to, and there's an exhaustive process of fact checking, looking into the context as well, because context is very important to any story. So I remember a story we did on Muslim Aid a few years ago, where we basically, I wouldn't say forced the resignation of the CEO, but I think it certainly led to his resignation. That took me 6 weeks to do. And yeah, but other articles are very simple, you know. The videos, again, I could just do a piece of camera, give my reaction to a story, and I've got it up within 20 minutes. Other videos, it takes a lot of editing. We have to travel to locations, we have to do interviews, we have to film other sequences, and it could take a week to put together. But generally what I try and do is, if I do like when I was in Leicester last year and did a very mini documentary, very short documentary, 25-minute documentary on the Hindutva violence and instigation in Leicester last year, that took me about 3 days to put together. So yeah, every article, every video, Dilly's podcast, for example, his Blood Brothers podcast, he'll probably film that over 2 or 3 hours, and then it will take 3 or 4 hours to edit together, and then a bit more time. So that's like a day's work or a day and a half's work. So yeah, that's my best attempt at answering your question.
And I think a lot of us are completely oblivious to that fact, to the fact checking, the video editing skills, and it's literally just 2 people who are running the show. And
we do have freelance people that we work with as well. So it's not just us. We have camera people and editors, and we subscribe to certain footage and stuff like that. And so it's not just us running the show, but we're the only two people that are full-time at Five Pillars.
Right. Even with that, I know I was trying to contact Brother Roshan, but he's very, very busy in his schedule, and it's testament to, I guess, almost seems like a life mission to put out what is true, or put out what, some of these controversial topics. And let's go into some of these controversial topics as we're, kind of discussing it. So, I started by saying that there was a grant you had that was became a source of controversy.
Yeah.
Would you like to speak a little bit about?
Yeah. Okay. So obviously the LGBTQ issue is one of the main issues facing British Muslims, in the sense that it's being pushed on us, isn't it? Especially in schools. So we do a lot of stories on that. Not stories that attack that community. We have no interest in doing that. But we do have an interest in normative Islam, and on kind of standing firm on our own principles, and not having non-Muslims effectively try to dictate to us what Islam says about this issue and that issue. So I think Dilly was on holiday in Jordan. And he went to what is reputed to be the cave of Prophet Lut in Jordan. I'm not 100% sure if it is the cave, but it's reputed to be. And outside of that cave, he just gave a little bit of a speech, 2 or 3 minute speech, where he outlined the normative position, Islamic position on same-sex relations. And he also said something like, us Muslims, we living in a secular society in the UK, we realize that other communities are free to believe what they wish, but just as we will not force Islam onto you, don't force your views onto us. And he also described the way the Quran describes the homosexual act, which is as a crime against God, which is completely factual. Now, just because he said that, now we get complaints all the time because we have lots of enemies, lots of haters. They always try and get us into trouble with different authorities. And our regulator is Impress. Now, it's self-regulation. It's not self-regulation, it's optional regulation. We don't actually have to be regulated by Impress. It's our choice because we want to give our readers and viewers the confidence that we are adhering to some clear editorial standards. We're not just cowboys shooting from the hip. And that's why we belong to Impress. But Impress found that we had incited hatred against the gay community because we had described the homosexual act as a crime against God. Now,
the normative position. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is the normative Islamic position. Now, this was obviously outrageous. We told Impress, this is outrageous. You are non-Muslims delving into areas of theology you should not be able to delve into. This is not hate speech. It doesn't meet the legal definition of hate speech. You are, in effect, going above and beyond your own remit by censoring us due to political pressure, because the Daily Mail had done articles on us, because Quilliam Foundation had attacked us, et cetera, et cetera. And we had a to and fro with them, but eventually they made their decision, which was against us. And because of that, we had to give back a grant of £3,000 to an affiliate organization of Impress that was giving us COVID funding for basically a small COVID grant. Now, we seriously contemplated leaving Impress because of this, on principle, because they're wrong. And I say publicly today, they're wrong, and it was outrageous what they did. We took shura. I wanted to leave personally. I wanted to leave. Dilly was in two minds. We took shura on this amongst some of the biggest ulama, most prominent ulama in the country, because we have a shura council. And the consensus was that we should stay under protest. But if it happens again, we should probably leave. So we stayed. We took that shura and we stayed. But, you know, alhamdulillah, that £3,000 that we lost, we got it back overnight. The Ummah gave it to us back overnight, and more, quite frankly. So would we do it again? Yeah, we'll do it again every day of the week. If Impress want to expel us, no problem. Their loss, not ours.
And it just highlights the difficulty of, like you're saying, speaking about this from a faith lens. And it's not so much about attacking a community. I mean, surely, you know, you'd think we all get taught about diversity, right? We talk about diversity of beliefs and agree to disagree. But somehow it seems on this topic, it's you can't disagree, or you cannot hold a different narrative. And
what a change, Ali. Sorry to interrupt, but I mean, obviously, I'm assuming I'm a bit older than you. So I remember the 1980s when I grew up. And that was a time when the majority of British people would probably have been against same-sex relations. Not probably, definitely. And within the space of 30 years, that's flipped on its head. And especially the younger generations seem to be very pro same-sex relations. But older generations, because I know, because obviously I know a lot of non-Muslims from, you know, kind of 45 plus, and they still have those conservative views, but they're not allowed to express them. But what I thought was really outrageous about the decision of Impress, our regulator, was they were effectively telling Muslims, you cannot state what is clearly in the Quran. So it's a very dangerous precedent to set, because every faith community should be able to express clearly what is in their books, obviously without inciting hatred or violence. There's ways we can say it. And we have to obey the law if we're living in this country. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I just thought it is an incredible turnaround, isn't it? How the LGBTQ lobby have succeeded in flipping this narrative on its head within the space of a couple of generations.
Absolutely, yeah. And the amount of public policy changes you're seeing in education now, which you're covering very, very well with RSC.
Ali, can I stop you there for 1 second?
Of course.
I've just noticed that my battery is quite low.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to put my charger in, which means I'm going to take my mic out.
Of course, don't worry.
Can I just give me a second?
Yeah. So as Brother Roshan does that, it's
Ali, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and the sound is still fine?
The sound is still fine, yes. All
right, perfect. I've taken the external mic out, so I'm just talking to you on the computer mic, but if you can hear me and see me, that's all that counts. Okay, sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. So yeah, it is absolutely incredible that within, like you say, within a space of 30 years, where something perhaps was reprehensible or even illegal, is somehow legal. And and I think they tried to do that with the trans, with the gender identity, and it seems like they're getting a little bit of a pushback on that one, with people saying it's especially too much to tell 5-year-olds or very young children about these concepts. It isn't so much, and a lot of times we get this, and it's not that we shouldn't talk about these issues. And I like what you put in your articles, that it's age inappropriate. It isn't that Islam shies away from gender identity issues or sexual identity issues, but it's about having, especially in education, the right audience for that. And also, just as we have in any other topic under sun, diversity in, understanding human sexuality or human gender identity, and there can be a variety of perspectives. it does very much feel like only one perspective is allowed, and as you say,
Yeah.
it's it makes it very undemocratic to to any
I
type
think
of.
the tide is turning, because I think a lot of non-Muslims, not just people of faith, because obviously the Jewish community is very concerned about what's going on in schools as well, and practicing Christians as well, but also people that don't have faith. They're finding this trans thing very troubling. The idea that you can just change your gender, and then a man can go in a woman's toilets and stuff like that. I think they find that very, very troubling. Also, the age inappropriateness of it. It's kind of, I think there's a time and a place. Should this really be taught? Any kind of sex education, really, should it be taught to 5-year-old children, 6 or 7-year-old children? We saw in Birchfields in Manchester, which is near where you live, they were showing this video called Willer's Story, which anyone can Google, and it's quite shocking. A 7-year-old boy suddenly turns into a girl, and the parents are encouraging that, and everything's wonderful. I mean, that is for me, that's child abuse. It's literally child abuse, and they're showing this to young kids in our schools. And I think Muslim parents are very complacent. We're seeing some protests happening, but by and large, are we really going to trust the most precious thing that we have, our children, to kind of gender ideologues that are literally going to try and brainwash them? This is about preserving our kids' iman. That's how serious it is. So I think Muslim parents around the country, we need to step up. I have such admiration for those that have already, and of course they're taking risks. But what's the worst that can happen? You homeschool your kids, and that's probably better for them anyway, especially at primary level. Yeah.
And I want to add on the emphasis of having a platform which, like Five Pillars, which amplifies those voices. I think without the protests being covered, I saw it was covered in BBC as well. Giving and amplifying those voices of Muslims, brave Muslims who went out to protest. Further, emphasizes the need to have an independent platform like yours, definitely. I also want to talk about what you've said in terms of journalism, which you can't really, you can't put the Islamic perspective forward and change that to maybe the MPs, which are in a similar situation where, a lot of places are Muslim majority, say in the UK, and then they will elect a Muslim MP, yet that MP, it is not so much of we expect that MP to have the Islamic view on everything, because obviously that's not what we're saying, but to even address the needs of their constituents, which are, like in, say, Bradford or other places are overwhelmingly Muslim.
I actually, if I can just stop you there for a second, I actually do expect them to have an Islamic perspective on everything. You might think that that's unreasonable, but I expect every believing and practicing Muslim to follow Islam. And that's all I care about, really. I don't care about the Labour Party or the Conservative Party. So I think we need to have higher standards. I think we're letting our Muslim MPs off the hook, because ultimately they're all kind of, they'll come to Eid receptions, and they'll come to iftars, they'll come to mosques, they'll solicit our votes as Muslims, yet when they get into Parliament, what is their constitution? Is it the Quran? No, it's the Labour Party constitution. It's the Tory Party's constitution, no matter what that says. So I think we should stop calling them Muslim MPs, and we should stop voting for them simply because they're Muslims. Quite frankly, I think, there may well be non-Muslim MPs or candidates more suitable for these positions than Muslims. So I'm sorry, but if you call yourself a Muslim, then I expect you to follow Islam. Now, I know that we're all sinners, and that none of us are perfect, but at least in your public positions, I expect you to follow Islam. Otherwise, don't call yourself a Muslim MP and don't expect any votes from Muslims. So yeah.
Absolutely. So the branding of it being, oh, I'm a Muslim and so on. And I think one of the ones we really saw it on was Hamza Yusuf, in, the first minister, and it being, okay, this person is the Muslim, first time Muslim. And I think for me, the shocking thing was that Kate Forbes, which was the opponent, was courageous enough to view her Christian opinion. And even though she said, I'm a slave to democracy and so on, but this is my opinion, somehow Hamza could not declare the Muslim opinion and say that this is what I would hold in normative Islam. And I think for the person who's the average viewer, who is neither Muslim or non-Muslim, can see a bit of hypocrisy in that, because it's like, okay, fine, there may be people in positions of leadership with faiths that we don't agree with, but I would expect them to be truthful to talk about what they do agree with.
Yeah, I mean, Hamza Yusuf, I mean, really, it was a disgrace. He disgraced himself, and he sold his, I mean, he's really, put it this way, he's favored the dunya over the akhirah. And I'm really concerned, if I was a friend of his, I'd be really concerned for his akhirah, the kind of stuff that he came out, because the kind of stuff that he came out is kufr. Now, I'm not saying he's a kafir, although many people will follow that opinion, quite frankly, and I don't have anything wrong with that position. I think it's a legitimate position to take. However, I think as Muslims, we should be hesitant to make takfir. But what he said was kufr. There's no doubt about that. And he's someone who does know his Islam as well. So I think his friends need to really have a word with him. He's not going to listen to the likes of Five Pillars or social media or whatever, but his friends need to get hold of him and say, look, this world is temporary. This world is temporary. You cannot go out on a public platform and contradict the Quran, because that is kufr, simple as that. And I think it was very instructive, because obviously Kate Forbes, she had the courage of her Christian convictions, didn't she? Now, why can't Hamza Yusuf have the courage of his Muslim convictions? I mean, I personally don't think that Muslims should get into party politics, because ultimately you're going to run up with that kind of brick wall. Sooner or later, you'll be forced to make a choice between your deen and the dunya. And most of the people in party politics will choose for the dunya, and that ain't a good situation. It might bring you a bit of temporary money and fame and whatever, but long term, we know where that leads, we know where that leads. So I personally would discourage Muslims, practicing Muslims, from getting into party politics. And I think we also have to get away from this obsession with advancing our interests to the Labour Party, or the Conservative Party, or it's usually the Labour Party, isn't it? Because ultimately, Keir Starmer he's just Boris Johnson light, or Rishi Sunak light, isn't he? Quite frankly, there's hardly any difference between the actual policies when it comes to every single issue affecting the Ummah, especially Israel, of course. But I just think that also I think, just off topic slightly, I think the Scottish National Party was very silly in electing Hamza Yusuf, because their main thing is Scottish independence. And to do that, they need to reach out to non-SNP voters. And Hamza Yusuf is very unpopular amongst non-SNP voters in Scotland because he's been a failure. He's in everything he's done, he's been a failure, but he's kind of failed upwards. Every time he's failed, he's got a promotion, which is absolutely amazing. So they should have elected Kate Forbes simply for that reason. So they've really shot themselves in the foot and the cause of Scottish independence as well. But getting back onto the Muslim issue, I think that, these Muslim MPs, we saw how they voted in the recent BDS vote in Parliament, where they, most of them, I think 80-90% of them failed to vote against a bill which would basically ban condemnation of Israel, would ban boycotting of Israel by councils and local authorities, etc. They couldn't even, bring themselves to vote against that because obviously they were following the party line. So these so-called Muslim MPs, they really aren't the way that we're going to advance our interests in this country. I think we need to build a strong Muslim community, our strong institutions built upon normative Islam. That's something we can't stray from, even if that means being a weak minority, because at least we'll have the akhirah then. And that is something that is non-negotiable. That should be the way forward, building a strong, independent, self-financing Muslim community so that we can't get sacked from jobs or pressure can't be put on us here, there, and everywhere. Alhamdulillah, I'm self-employed, so no one can sack me. No non-Muslim can sack me, and we have to get to the stage where we're self-financing, where we can help each other if we're attacked from different institutions. And we need to build this community on the basis of normative mainstream Islam.
Absolutely. I think it's the integrity of people which comes into question. And a lot of people will agree and they say, well, why go into a position which will which will hinder that? And also, I think the minimum you could do is at least state the opinion or your belief. And I think if you're in a position of power and you're even unable to state what you believe, let alone, what's going to happen, I think this is a certain hypocrisy with that
obviously it would be preferable if we could enter the institutions of power and exert power for the good of the Muslim community from those institutions of power. But unfortunately, Brother Ali, the price is too high. The price comes at the expense of our Islam, and that is never a price that we can pay. The Jewish community, for example, even the Hindu community, they have followed this route whereby they have integrated into the institutions of power very successfully, but it's come at the price of their deen, ultimately. It's come at the price of their, how many Jews are atheists now in this country? There's very few actually practicing, believing Jews in this country. It's probably a minority, and they're very secular, but they're very atheist. They're not very religious. You could say the same for the Hindu community to a certain extent as well. So that is something that we can never compromise on. So we just have to focus on building a successful Muslim community from outside the system, not inside the system, because that's never going to work.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you're right. There's some hard facts to accept as a minority of Muslims living, within the UK. We have to realize that we can't, as you said, our deen is the most important thing for us, and our akhirah is the most important. So definitely agree. What do you think of plans for 5 pillars going forward?
Yeah.
Do you think, do you have a strategy? Are there, as any organization would have some type of, it's definitely that the LGBTQ issue is something that you've taken on and you're like, okay, we really need to highlight this because this is one of the challenges facing British Muslims at the moment. Do you think you have a vision to cover other, as you mentioned, Israel? I mean, recently, obviously we had that bill, which again saw very poor representation from so-called Muslim MPs. In terms of 5 pillars, do you think you have certain areas you would really like to forward?
Yeah, so, alhamdulillah, we've been going for around 10 years now, and we've had a lot of success, alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, and, we've had, we're quite prominent on different, so especially social media platforms. But it's always ups and downs because we get censored a lot as well, especially on Facebook, which mainly over the LGBTQ issue, I think, because they just will not countenance any discussion about the LGBTQ issue. So other platforms,
of what's happened on Facebook.
well, we've got violations. We've had our page taken down in the past. We've got suspensions. We've had our reach decimated. You know, we have about 500,000 people on our Facebook page. So everything we post on there should be getting a very good reach. It should be reaching, you know, we used to reach, I would say on Facebook alone, we used to reach between 5 and 7 million people a month. And on a regular basis. And now that has been decimated. We don't reach that kind of audience simply through censorship, basically because of the LGBTQ articles and videos that we posted. So it's blatant censorship, like we're living in North Korea or something, you know? Other platforms are better when it comes to freedom of speech, like Twitter and others as well. TikTok has huge potential, but they censor a lot as well. But they did, actually, our biggest reach on this latest Birchfield protest was actually on TikTok, believe it or not. And TikTok is not a platform, which is a platform which we're quite new to as well. So we're still getting the hang of it. But I think our video had about 400,000 views or more than that, just on TikTok alone. So that is an area we're looking to. Well, basically, we want 5 Pillars to be massive, and where we've had a lot of success, but we've also hit a certain plateau where we want to go beyond that. We want to be literally the go-to platform for Islamic journalism around the world. And in order to do that, we want to kind of have a presence, a permanent presence in different countries around the Muslim world, even a base abroad. We want the website and our content to be in different languages, you know, in Arabic, in French, in Urdu, in Germany even, you know, where there are big Muslim audiences, not just in English. We want to have a 5 Pillars USA, we want a 5 Pillars France, 5 Pillars Germany, etc., you know. So those are some of the ideas. We just want to do everything bigger and better, because the surveys that we've done say that people appreciate us. They appreciate our values. They appreciate what we're probably the only ones breaking stories, because no one else breaks stories. That's the thing. I think that's what makes us unique, is that we're not just copying and pasting from the BBC website and, you know, whatever. We're actually breaking the stories. We're bringing you stories that you would not have heard of other than hearing it from 5 Pillars. Those stories would not exist, because those stories come from context. They come from people that are giving us these stories, and they give us these stories because they trust us and they have confidence in us. And I think that's what really makes us unique. So the feedback that we get from our viewers and readers is that we're doing everything right, but we're not big enough. We need to be reaching more people. We need to be doing more content. Instead of 3 or 4 stories a day, we need to be doing 10 stories a day. You know, we need to be doing more videos, more documentaries, more investigations, more content, and reaching more people. So this is kind of our goal in the next few years, to kind of explode 5 Pillars from a successful but limited platform to a platform that really explodes editorially and really reaches more homes and becomes ultimately a household name in every Muslim household.
Inshallah, may Allah give you success and tawfiq to do that. And I really like that, what you said in terms of feedback driven. So you're listening to the readers, and you're listening to that, and, you know, saying what do they want, how do they want it to change. And I think that that's testament to your success. What would you say to people who are listening, who want to support this, or what can be people doing to support 5 Pillars? How does 5 Pillars run? Like, is it funded? How does
it's funded by the Ummah? So most of the people that support 5 Pillars, I don't know who they are, because they are the average Muhammed and Yusuf and Aisha in Manchester, in Birmingham, or in America, or even places in the Muslim world, and they're giving £5 a month, or they're giving £10 a month. Some, you know, alhamdulillah, are giving a lot more than that. But these are the people, that's my boss now. You know, these are the people that, they are my boss. And those are the ones that I take their feedback very seriously, because they're ultimately the ones that are running 5 pillars financially. So yeah, it's very important to us not to have any kind of government funding, because that comes with strings attached. It's very important for us not to have any like sectarian funding from a sectarian, because a lot of the media in the Muslim world is funded by one particular sect of Islam. It could be Sufis, it could be Shias, it could be Salafis, it could be et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to stay away from that, and we wanted to have a platform for the entire ummah, you know, that will reflect the views of the entire ummah. We also feel that it's essential to be editorially independent, because if we're not, then you can't really trust us, because there'll always be some kind of agenda above us which we're following. So I think Dilly and I have agreed for many years now that we're not going to take any government funding, and we're not going to take any funding which is strings attached. We're just going to appeal to the ummah. Look, you know, go on a website, there's a donation link there. Support, if you like our work, if you follow us and you like our work and you think it's essential to inform and educate the ummah and empower the ummah through the vehicle of Islamic journalism, if you think that's a worthy thing, then support us directly, you know, via PayPal, via our website. We do Ramadan campaigns. We just did a Dhul Hijjah campaign. Get in touch directly with me or with Dilly, and we can, you know, arrange some kind of support. So that's what I say, and that is how I envisage funding. We also know that there are a lot of rich Muslims that, you know, 100 grand, maybe nothing to them, you know, and they may spend it on a holiday in the Bahamas, you know, but no, give that holiday up, give it to us, see what we can do with that, you know. And so we're thinking very big in terms of, you know, approaching not just the ordinary Aisha and Muhammad, but also Muslim business people in the UK and abroad who will give us that funding, fi sabilillah. That's important, you know. Give us that funding because they trust us, they have confidence in us, and they see what we're doing with their work. So that is how we fund 5 pillars. Obviously, we have an element of advertising as well that you can see on our site. But it's mainly funded through, you know, memberships, donations, advertising. That's how we operate.
And it's a very homegrown or a natural movement, it seems, within the Muslim community, which is brilliant in terms of the current situation, as you described so well, where it's almost impossible to cover something fruitfully for the Muslim community. And you know, when I started Strong Support before, didn't realize how badly the narrative is censored, and the few people who are courageous enough to talk about the narrative in a fair manner, you know, and being quite reasonable, just speaking about things, you know. So I'm very grateful for the Roshan and the 5 Pillars team that they continue to do this, and, you know, may Allah support them with their intentions, niyah, to obviously further help the community. And, you know, people, obviously a lot of our audiences already readers. If you're already readers, please do consider donation. And in terms of, you know, I just think, like, I mean, I have a news subscription and you pay something for that, and somehow we think, it's almost like when we go to mosques or something as Muslims, sometimes we have an idea that, oh, the community should just give us a mosque, or they should just give us these services. But actually, if we do value, if you're on Twitter or whatever platform, and you're valuing the content which is being produced, to then be a partner in that going forward in donating. And I, you know, can't emphasize, even if it's £5 a month or £10 a month, it's a monthly donation, which is very important. Fantastic. Is it okay we go for Q&A? Is there
Yes,
anything
of course,
else
no problem. Do you mind if I just get a glass of water though? Because my mouth is very dry. 1 second, please.
Absolutely, go ahead. So if you're tuning in, I know someone has their hand raised up, so you can raise your hand. Just be aware that this is live, so your name will be shown on the recording and so on. So just be aware of that. Or you can also anonymously put on the Q&A. I know there's a Q&A which is already there, and we can discuss that, but I have somebody who we have, which wants to talk. Let me just bring this person. Assalamu alaikum. This is Nadira. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Thank you for taking my call. I just had a question, basically 2 questions. And the first question, I guess, was to you, brother. And so I've read recently that they were doing this ban on conversion therapy. I think that ban has been postponed to 2024, which is, I'm guessing, when the new Labour Party, or if the Labour Party comes into power, which is obviously causing a bit of a concern in terms of, you know, whether that's going to be accelerated. What's your view on that, and how are you guys dealing with it?
Thank you. That's a really good question, and thank you for bringing that forward. Yes, we have, obviously, as you know, we discussed at the start, we have a legislation which has come in to ban so-called conversion therapy. They define conversion therapy as a predetermined attempt to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity, and of course that is reprehensible. When you read the definition, that nobody should be doing that. But the issue really with the bill is that is what we were speaking earlier, that it claims to be neutral, but it's not neutral. So, for example, the Memorandum of Understanding of Conversion Therapy, which most mental health bodies have signed, will only talk about LGBT affirming organizations as the right way or the affirming way, and any type of faith affirming therapy, or people wanting faith affirming therapy and not wanting LGBT, is now being given the term conversion therapy, even though that's not what the definition actually means. So it creates unintended consequences where there isn't. I think the other thing to note as well is therapy is not regulated in the UK. So you are bringing a legislation to legislate something which isn't legislated. Also, the ban doesn't just apply to therapists, it applies to everyone. So if you, if you tell your child who is under 18 that perhaps they want to explore their sexuality or live according to the deen, and and your child is unsure, or they're questioning their identity, you could be accused of conversion therapy because you're not allowing them to identify as gay or bisexual or this. only one narrative that we said. So when you look at the bill, at first it seems harmless, but when you look into the details of it, it prevents it. It creates a chilling effect for anybody who wants to work against the narrative. And I think the reason why it's been delayed is because of the transgender issue, which most people, the common person, does not think that you should change your body or you should, to align with gender identity. So I think the common person down the street is opposed to that idea. So they're facing a lot of opposition for that. So you're correct. It's been allegedly put to next parliamentary year or session, and we've always been working to get the representation to the government. Strong Support has previously spoken with the government officials on this, and it is a matter which is very pressing for the existence of us. So for example, one of the things is, why haven't we registered as charity? Well, we don't know. We don't know how they view us, how the regulators will see us. So it basically doesn't allow the people that we help from getting whatever help that they want. And inshallah, we can solve that issue by correcting this and campaigning. But it doesn't seem like the bill is going to pass through, because a lot of faith communities are seeing a lot of issues with it, and a lot of, I would say, secular therapists as well are seeing a lot of issues with the practicalities of something like that. Does that answer it? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to go, there's some questions. There's a question that says, what's the moment you said to yourself, oh no, I wish I didn't post it, I regret that. I saw your body language is humble. How do you balance your media work in front of camera?
Can I see these questions as well? Oh yeah, can I? Let me have a look. Q&A.
Yes, it's the first one.
How do you, I mean, there aren't many stories that I posted. I mean, obviously there's quite a lot of thought process that goes behind when we post articles and videos. So there aren't many that I've regretted, to be honest. There aren't many that we've taken down as well. Sometimes, obviously, we do make corrections if we get things wrong, which is fair enough. We'll make the correction straight away, and we do get things wrong from time to time, no doubt about that. I don't know, I guess maybe some of the stuff where we're getting involved in social media dramas. You know how YouTubers and social media influencers, they always have dramas, don't they, between each other? And sometimes they have beefs. I think sometimes we've focused a little bit too much on that. Mainly because we want to have, ultimately a lot of Muslims are into that as well, and that there is a halal kind of space for, social media influencers, whatever, and they do have lots of followers, and sometimes they become kind of Muslim celebrities in their own right. And I think maybe we're guilty of kind of getting involved in their dramas a little bit too much. Without naming names, I don't want to name names. But yeah, I would say that would be one slight regret, because ultimately, those social media dramas are not really as significant as real life, an online beef is something that we probably could ignore, even if it means losing a few likes and having a little bit less attention, I think it's probably not good to kind of fuel that kind of, you know, Muslim social media drama scene. What was the next question? Sorry, I just took it off. About.
I think that follow-up question for that: what hinders? I think this might be for me. What hinders you from making a documentary film about stories of SSA strugglers? Documentary.
Oh yeah, I found them now. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't. I can see all the questions now. Your body language confident, balance your media work in front of camera with your morals and avoid arrogance, kibber. I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, what I would say to people is that I'm certainly not a role model. I'm not an Islamic scholar. I'm not an alim. I'm just, you know, a layperson who happens to be a journalist and happens to be a believing and practicing Muslim. But it is, yeah, sometimes obviously, I think in my younger days, it did go to my head a little bit when I was getting a lot of attention. I was in front of camera and getting a lot of attention. But that was mainly before the social media age, to be honest. And when the social media age came about, I was less into that because perhaps I was just a bit more mature. So, but I see a lot of younger social media influencers. It goes to their head, the attention goes to their head, and they think they're better than they are. They think they're more Islamic than they are. And they think they're more qualified to talk on subjects when they're not. And, you know, my dad always used to say to me, if you don't know, don't talk, you know? And I think that's pretty good advice because, you know, stay in your lane. And sometimes I've drifted from my lane, no doubt about it. But I think I'm a little bit more mature now. So I kind of stick to subjects that I still like to prod. I still like to poke and to wind people up, et cetera, but I usually stick to subjects that I can talk about. But at the same time, everyone should realize that I'm simply an ordinary Muslim like everyone else. I'm not an alim, and like everyone else, I have many, many faults. I'm not a role model. Don't follow me as a role model. Follow Rasulullah as a role model. Follow the ulama, they're the inheritors of the prophets. That's who you should follow. But I am someone who tries to kind of, you know, bring genuine issues to the fore. And alhamdulillah, I've been blessed with a platform and 5 pillars, which enables me to do that. Shall I go through the next few questions?
Yeah.
What hinders you from making a documentary film about the stories of SSA strugglers in English? I think that's a very good idea. I just can't do everything. I haven't got the means to do everything. But I think that's a very, very good idea to do a documentary on that. It would be a fantastic documentary. So that's probably something I'll write down for the future. A documentary which does, Salam Roshan. Sorry, I just lost that question. It seemed to just disappear for some reason. Salam Roshan, what's your tips on making independent journalism without formal training due to not wanting any association with the mainstream media? I think you do need to have some kind of training. I got my training actually through the mainstream. Even though I didn't want to work there, I was there for 5 years, and it was a fantastic training because you get some really good professionals there. And I took that training into the Islamic journalism that I do later. So I do think that people think it's very easy to be a journalist, and everyone can do it, but they can't. It's just like any profession. You have to have a training. You have to, you know, learn certain ethics and a certain way how to write an article, how to kind of edit a video, et cetera, et cetera. And it's something that is honed over many years. However, 5 Pillars is actually thinking very seriously of launching online courses and face-to-face courses where we actually teach, because our goal is to have basically an army of citizen journalists, because we know that everyone has a smartphone. So just doing something as simple as teaching someone how to use their smartphone in a journalistic way so that you can produce really good content, you know, clear videos, clear audio, teaching someone how to write an article so that they can do amazing blog posts. If we could build an army of Muslim citizen journalists, just imagine how that could compound and ultimately spread the narrative of Islam that we're trying to spread. It would be a dawah exercise, in effect, on a mass scale. So this is something that we want to do as well, is we want to actually train Muslim journalists so they don't necessarily have to go into the mainstream to get that same training. Let me look at the next question. Trying to go through this reasonably quickly because I do have to leave. I've recently joined youth as parent champion, so I can give, I think that's one for Ali, right? Oh, actually, this is really important, but unfortunately parents are scared of being labeled terrorists and being referred to Prevent. What is Roshan's view on Prevent getting involved in this way? I think Prevent are looking to silence Muslims. I think you cannot fight a jihad without taking a few blows in return. Now, what I mean by that, because I consider what I'm doing a jihad, it's a media jihad. You know, literally, this is what I consider my work to be. And I can't say to Muslims come to me and say, oh, I don't want to do that because there might be blowback. And I say to them, of course there's going to be blowback. Look at the prophets. Look, they brought the message of, you know, La ilaha illallah to all the people, and they got the most blowback. You cannot do this work that we're doing without having blowback. And it's a privilege to have that blowback. It means that we're doing the right thing, we're on the right path, we're going to get a reward from Allah in this life and the hereafter. It means we are pushing the right buttons, annoying the right people. Of course, there will be blowback. You cannot avoid it. And if you think you can, you're deluded. Quite frankly, Muslims need to get brave. We need to be courageous. We need to be an ummah of lions, not mice. And that means that you may be targeted by Prevent. That means you might have your job and your livelihood threatened. And I say, so what? That is our struggle. We are not on this dunya to be the richest, you know, home. We are not on this dunya to have the most, you know, kind of accoutrements that the world has to offer. We are here to worship our Lord and to follow the way of the Prophet. So if you're going to get blowback, so be it. It's a privilege to have that blowback. Next question. What would you advise us or have learned to be wary of, and how to navigate the media and other organizations who do attack or target people for speaking out about these issues and try to address or make a stand, or when Muslims are trying to counter these teachings, especially those who are individuals or groups in our community to tackle these issues? I'll have to read that again. I didn't quite understand it. What would you advise to be wary of and navigate the media? Okay, all right. I can give you a general answer to that. So look, don't trust the mainstream media. They're not on your side. They're Islamophobes, and there might be good individual journalists within the mainstream media, but by and large, the system is not a system that we should support or trust or even have any hope in. But there could be some individual journalists within that system that are worth talking to and reaching out to because they could amplify your voice. So it's not a black and white issue, but generally I would say that we should forget about the mainstream media. They're not on our side, they never will be on our side. There's nothing we can do to make them be on our side as well, because you know, the issue is much bigger than us. You know, we can only ever make ripples into what the mainstream media is doing. Ultimately, they will do their own thing. We have to do our own thing as well. We have to build our own institutions, our own media, not just Five Pillars, but other Muslim media that is effective, that is first of all on the right path, on the normative Islamic path, but also Muslim media that is professional, that, you know, doesn't just spread lies and innuendo, but is professional, that is regulated, hopefully, that can reach millions of people. This is what we have to be focusing on very tightly. We have to focus on what is in our sphere of influence and what is in our sphere of control. The mainstream media is something completely out of our sphere of influence and out of our sphere of control. So let's just focus on what we can control and what we can build and what we can change, and the non-Muslims will do their thing.
Very, very wise responses. I'd like to thank Brother Roshan for his time, and I'm sure he has a very busy agenda ahead, and would like to again ask viewers who think this is beneficial. If you want some of these plans to continue, you can go on the website. It's 5pillarsuk.com. There's the support section, or you can go 5pillarsuk.com/donate. Even if it's £5, £10 monthly, I think. For me personally, when I understood the silencing and the censorship which is there in media, and you're hearing from firsthand from Roshan, who's been doing this for decades, as to how important this really is, and he's put it beautifully of how it's a jihad of speaking haqq. Is a jihad. We talked about haqq when we started, about the Quran asking us to speak the truth, and how it is difficult to speak the truth in this time. So organizations which are doing that, and having a presence in the media is so important. So I do encourage everybody here to do please support that, and continue to I continue to pray for the success of Brother Roshan in 5 Pillars. May Allah bless you. May Allah, what's so beautiful about our Lord is that He even blesses our niyyah. Even if we have a niyyah to do something, He blesses us for that intention. So I hope that whatever is good, you have the tawfiq to do that. And from strong support in the team, extend a thank you for covering these issues. I think we wouldn't really have outlets if it wasn't for outlets like 5 Pillars.
Exactly, okay, brother. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.